Lecture 3, Society of 17th Century Taiwan. We've introduced Chen Di's East Aborigine Story, 1603, and Yu Yonghe's Small Sea Travel Diaries, 1697, in previous two lectures, with the former from the first decade of 17th century and the latter the last. Both of them can help us understand Taiwanese social circumstances in that century. To reconstruct the experience of social changes that pre-modern Taiwanese people had gone throughout 17th century, these are the texts to study. First, let's see what Chen Di said about Taiwan in a time when the Han Chinese and the Dutch had not yet set their feet on the land. Based on Chen Di's article, East Aborigine Story, we can tell that indigenous peoples he met in western Taiwan had been living in social units called si, or tribes. For each tribe, the number of members was between 500 or 600 at its least and 1,000 at its most. Some of you may wonder how many tribes there were. Unfortunately, Chen had never mentioned the number of tribes. We can only rely on Yu Yonghe's accounts to estimate the number. According to Yu's Small Sea Travel Diaries, the number was at least 255. If, say, there was 500 members for each tribe, then there would be at least 127,500 indigenous people on the land. Since there were not many foreigners in Taiwan, we can arguably assume that the number was roughly equal to the whole population of early 17th century Taiwan. And how was their daily living? We learn from East Aborigine Story that they didn't have a chief but a leader for every tribe. The position of leader was granted customarily to someone who had the most offspring in the tribe. A leader had the power and responsibility to give orders to his people. Whenever a tribe was in conflict with another, they would fight against each other and then make peace the next day, like nothing had happened before. Simple and straightforward enough, their lifestyle didn't last for long because many foreigners have reached Taiwan for different reasons during the 17th century and thus changing their culture. For instance, Japanese pirates attacked the coastal area time and again throughout 17th century. Han Chinese people had also frequently interacted with the indigenous on their short business trips to Taiwan. Over the course of the century, Taiwan had been gradually opened up for business, and the society, though unexpectedly, had been opened up for international interaction as well. The question is, what nation played the biggest role in opening up Taiwan? It was the Netherlands. The coming of the Dutch people, or red-haired guys as Taiwanese people used to call them, definitely changed Taiwan's role on the international stage. The story began in 1624, when the Dutch East India Company reached Diaoyuan, Tainan. At first, the company's plan was just to build a rest stop for Dutch merchant ships traveling around East Asia. Having settled down in Tainan, the Dutch then realized it was of great commercial profit to colonize Taiwan. Therefore, the Fort Zeelandia and other defense facilities were established to take a firm grasp of the land. In 1653, Fort Provincia was also constructed and served as an administrative center. Meanwhile, Spanish people also tried to colonize Taiwan and succeeded in occupying northern Taiwan in 1626. Spaniards then established forts in northern parts of Taiwan, including Siliaodao, now Heping Island, Geelong, and Howei, now Danshui. The Spanish rule didn't last long, however. The Spaniards were forced to leave in 1642 when the Dutch people, who were in intense commercial competition with them, occupied their lands and took over their resources once owned by the Spanish people. Some of you may wonder what kind of resources they were competing for. What we've learned from historical texts is that at the time when the Dutch East India Company took Diaoyuan, deerskin made by indigenous people was the main commodity, along with a little produce. Having done some research, the company found that the soil in Tainan was rich and ready to till. To increase the amount of produce, like rice and sugar, the Dutch had some mainlanders from the coastal area of Fujian and settlers from Penghu Archipelago come to cultivate the land. As a result, a larger number of Han Chinese people started to settle in southern Taiwan. The number of the Han Chinese was close to 10,000 in the beginning of this period and around 25,000 to 30,000 in the end, according to historians' estimation. The number of the indigenous, on the other hand, was estimated to be 45,000 to 50,000. To historians' surprise, the number of employees of the Dutch East India Company in Taiwan was astonishingly small, with only 2,000 armed mercenaries and 600 governmental and civil workers. With relatively few human resources, the company still successfully established the very first colonial regime in Taiwan. Their governing strategies included adopting institutional arrangements of European countries, forming regional assemblies, consolidating their dominion over the indigenous, and controlling Han Chinese people by means of economic benefits. In addition, they also had a great influence on the culture of the indigenous people through missionary work, mostly done by a newly constructed basic educational system that schooled many indigenous people. But why did the Dutch lose Taiwan after all? To the dismay of the Dutch, Taiwan was taken over by the Han Chinese under the leadership of Koxinga in the year of 1662. In that year, the regime of the Southern Ming, to which Koxinga stayed loyal, was almost eliminated by the rising empire of the Qing. As a military leader of the Southern Ming, Koxinga had no choice but to retreat to Taiwan. In a wish to retake the mainland, Koxinga attempted to convert Taiwan into a military base to battleship with the Qing in the future. His efforts were, of course, resisted by the Dutch, so he had his army assaulted Fort Zeelandia and finally taking it and then expelling the Dutch people out of Taiwan. To govern Taiwan, a land he had just acquired, Koxinga adopted regional institutional arrangements of the Ming regime, a bureaucracy he was familiar with. He renamed Taiwan as Dongdu, or East Capital, and created a central government called Chengtianfu, and two regional governments called Tianxing County and Wannian County. He also strengthened the military capabilities through institutional reform, and adopted a policy in which soldiers served dual roles as farmers. By doing so, military capabilities would be enhanced as the lands of Taiwan were further developed, and production capabilities greatly increased. Many military-related place names we now have, like Yuanjiao, Zhuoying, Hojing, Zhuozhen, Yingding, Xinying, Liuying, Lingfengying, Hoying, Xiaying, and Liujia, actually derived from the military activities back at that time. When Koxinga died, his son Zhengjing succeeded. He renamed Taiwan once again as Dongning, or Eastern Peace, and upgraded both Tianxing County and Wannian County into provinces. The whole central government was rearranged for better performance as well. For those being ruled, it was a completely novel experience to live under the rule of Mingzheng and go through the changes it had made. Let's recount what Taiwanese people had experienced during this period. First, Koxinga led an army of 25,000 soldiers to Taiwan and expelled the Dutch. The number of soldiers increased to 37,500 in the later reign of the regime, not to count their family dependents. The number of Han Chinese settlers in the period was also many, around 200,000. During Mingzheng's reign, the government kept expanding its political and military boundaries toward habitats of the indigenous people. The indigenous, however, were reluctant to obey Mingzheng's rule, so the government and the indigenous were in constant tension. In the end, the rule of the government only reached the area around Erlin, Zhanghua, and Chietong, Pingdong, now Jiadong, Pingdong. To summarize, the Mingzheng government had adopted the Ming dynasty's institutional arrangements, settled down soldiers and civilians, established schools, built Confucius temples, and held imperial experiments.
Because of the active governance and thoughtful management of the Mingzheng Kingdom, Tainan City, where the central government Chengtianfu was once located, became a living space in which the Han Chinese predominantly resided Chinese. As a result, the Plains indigenous society in early 17th century that Chen Di had depicted was forever gone. After Zheng Jing died, his sons fought against each other for the throne, leading the kingdom into chaos, leaving a great opportunity for the Qing Empire to step in. The Qing Emperor Kangxi then sent an army to Taiwan in 1683 and successfully took the land. Zheng Keshuang, one of Zheng Jing's sons who eventually inherited the position as king, was then forced to surrender. It was then that Taiwan became a part of the Qing Empire. Having taken the land, the Qing government re-established the central administration in Taiwan right away and arranged the regional institutions yet again. Moreover, the central administration was renamed in the following year as Taiwanfu, which had 3 subordinate regional governments: Taiwan County, Zhulo County, and Fengshan County.